Okay, everyone, it's 11:15, so we are going to get started because somehow the time goes so quickly. Thank you all for logging in. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm delighted to introduce Angie Rechtine, who is a professional development consultant and formerly an SEL coach.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
it.
your
Yeah,
formal title,
that
Angie?
was. Yeah.
um, for Springfield Local Schools, and we are delighted to have Angie with us this morning, sharing her expertise. Um, just as a reminder, I'm going to ask you to stay muted unless you want to unmute and say something specific if Angie has a question, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat and looking at that. We do have the captions available, so if you need the captions, please just in your settings, click that you want to show the captions and you should be able to see that. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Angie. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me this morning. Just like Christina shared, I am a social and emotional consultant. My background is I worked for Springfield Local Schools for many years. I was a school counselor, and then I transitioned to a social emotional learning coach. That position gave me lots of experience and practice in this realm of social emotional learning. I worked with students, teachers, administration, district, and building level. And our primary focus was really to focus on those preventative measures, how we can put things in place to help our students and support them. And really look at those social emotional components. So today I'm going to be talking about emotional regulation in the classroom. We're going to talk about what it is, but probably more importantly, how to support it and teach it and manage it so students are effective with it. So in our agenda, just like I said, we're going to start with what emotional regulation is, why it's important, what dysregulation looks like, because you probably do see that in a lot of your students, just some different behaviors to look for, and then more importantly, strategies to implement and support the process. Whenever I do trainings, my go-to is for you to have takeaways. I remember sitting in PDs in the past and even currently, and I just like the things that you can take away and use tomorrow. So I'll be focusing a lot on that. And then at the end, there will be opportunities for any questions, answers, comments, any discussions on what we talked about. So just to start us off, what is emotional regulation? It's the ability to monitor which emotions we have, when we have them, and how we experience and express them. All of us have feelings, and feelings actually are just an expression or experience that we have in retrospect to what we've gone through or what something has happened. It's our reaction to it. And a lot of times we may not be able to control that feeling per se, but we can control how we manage it, and we can control how we regulate it, how we can process it in our body, what skill sets we can do to help manage that emotion and then respond or act appropriately. So with students' capacity to regulate their emotion, as we know, it affects obviously their life with their family and peers. It affects their academic performance, long-term mental health, and really their overall ability to be successful. If an individual has a hard time regulating their feelings, you're going to see that even in some adults that we may come into play with each day, but they may have a hard time managing stress, or their emotional state may be like a roller coaster up and down. They may have outbursts. They may not be able to handle stress and just kind of withdrawal and shut down. So those are all barriers to us living our best life and being our most successful. So having emotional regulations, having those skill sets developed and used appropriately are key in any individual's success. How does having a strong emotional regulation compass help us? From a student perspective, students have more academic success. They can reboot maybe when something is troubling to them or they don't understand, they keep going. As our presenter said earlier today, they have that grit. They can kind of keep moving with it. They don't give up, they don't withdraw, they don't get frustrated. They're able to manage if they're feeling extremely happy or excited. They're able to manage if it's a bad day and they're not feeling their best, how they can regulate themselves to get back into a successful peace of mind and mindset. They're able to problem solve. They don't just give up, but they look at strategies to get through and problem solve. They're able to maintain attention for longer periods of time. They can handle stress and trauma. They're more resilient. They bounce back, and they're able to use appropriate coping skills. What does emotion dysregulation look like? And you probably see these in your students each day. The younger they are, probably more so. But when you see somebody who is suffering from emotional dysregulation, you're going to see those behavior outbursts. They have a feeling that they just do not know how to handle. So it's going to go back to that mindset of fight or flight, and they are going to be just reacting to their emotion. You may see that hyper or impulsivity. They may be fidgety with different things. Again, if they're stressed out or they have that uneasiness, you may see some of those more reactive behaviors, anger, lash out. You could see anxiety in that student. On the flip side, and this is seen more in our middle school, high school students, but you'll start to see that disconnect, that unmotivation. If things are too hard or too difficult, or they're not motivated, they are going to disconnect. If they don't have those skill sets on how to manage that feeling, it's easier to check out. If we don't give them the coping skills on how to manage these feelings, they come up with their own. And just checking out and giving up is easy at some point for some students. You'll see struggles with peers, peer relationships. They won't know how to handle different conflicts. They will maybe lash out or kind of overly be emotional to different situations. And like we talked about, they will struggle with the academic portion of that as well. As students start to get older, if they still are having some problems with dysregulation, that's when you start to see those high-risk behaviors. They start possibly self-harming, there's substance abuse, alcohol abuse coming in, again, because they don't have the skill sets and the coping skills to appropriately handle these feelings. So they start to look at other avenues, which may not be the best choices for them. Why does emotional dysfunction kind of vary among us? Because it does. Again, just speaking from a classroom standpoint or school, you know your kids that are kind of more the tougher ones that can really kind of handle and pivot and kind of go with the flow. And you know your students that really need that extra emotional support. So why does it vary? Genetics plays a part in that. Some of us are just wired to be more anxious or high strung, or just more kind of chill and lax and want to kind of take a step back when things get difficult. Obviously, we've know, and this is what we talk about a lot the last couple of years with COVID, but trauma can also affect their emotional state, especially if trauma happened at a younger age when, you know, that loving, caring, nurturing atmosphere is so important for them. And if that doesn't happen, then that can kind of totally rewire their brain and how it processes feelings and how it regulates itself. Falls right in there. It's to neglect having low levels of validation, especially once students are in elementary and they're kind of learning these skill sets. If it's not validated, if it's not shown to them as, you know, if they use a skill and it's not positively recognized, then that can cause them to not understand what is regulation is what is not. If they get more attention and love and support for throwing a fit when they're angry versus using coping skills, then we're teaching them, okay, throwing a fit is what you do when you're angry, because that's when you get the support and guidance that you need. So kind of having that balance and giving them that validation when they are using skill sets that are appropriate. That goes to those parenting styles as well. If we're focusing on very strict and punitive parenting styles, children aren't really learning what regulation is, because they're always being told they're doing wrong, they're doing it wrong, they're doing wrong, and that modeling and teaching is not going on. And then also stress can lead to that as well. Environment, and a lot of this is out of our control as educators. They come to us and live more than half their life in a different environment than we create and control. But if a child is living in an environment that's chaotic, there's yelling, it's unstructured, day to day is very different, they kind of don't know what's going on, that is going to have an emotional toll on them. Behaviors will be much more reactive. Their feelings will be much more reactive because, again, it's kind of that fight or flight mentality. They're always going to be ready on the defense or what they need to do to survive. But if they come from environments that are calm, predictable, very solution-based, then you're going to see more of those stable behaviors. You're going to see more positive emotional regulation because they're in situations where they know, okay, if I do this and this situation, this problem will be resolved. That solution-based approach. Looking at classroom environments, this can be a factor too. I know I said home in this, but we've talked about this a lot in other sessions, and I know that this is quite common when we give PDs and things like that, but creating that calm classroom, a structured classroom for them, so there's no surprises, they know what to expect, can help a lot with feeling regulation. So an important component to know about feeling regulation is it's not necessarily a skill that we're born with. It needs to be taught, it needs to be modeled, it needs to be practiced and developed. I'm going to show you a video of a teacher, and this is from an elementary standpoint, of just some strategies that she's using in her classroom to teach and model emotional regulation.
My body is so steady and calm because your bodies are so steady.
Being able to teach children how to manage their emotions is actually a very important pathway to intellectual learning, because if you can't manage your feelings, it's hard to open up your brain to be able to receive the content that you're trying to learn.
I do a lot of work around self-awareness and being able to name emotions and then make a choice around those. You have a large range of emotions during a school day working with children. Some are completely joyful and so exciting, and some are really frustrating or incredibly disheartening. When you talk when I'm talking, it feels like you're not ready to listen to me. So one of the most authentic ways for me to help them expand their own vocabulary is to use my personal experience with my own emotions in the classroom. When people start talking about other things while I'm still giving directions, it feels frustrating for me, and I have to take a breath, catch myself, and say, it's okay, I'm gonna try again.
One of the critical features of learning is modeling. We learn by watching others. In this classroom, we see the teacher modeling her recognition of her emotions and also modeling how she deals with them in productive ways. And that is the first step in helping children learn to manage their own emotions.
Big breath in. Big breath out.
It's complicated, so we breathe. And that's how so when we're ever going crazy, it helps us calm down.
It's based on real life information. Can you make sure your body's sending a message that you're listening to me? Because it hurts my heart when you look the other way when I'm talking. Thanks, dude. My heart feels much better now. Naming my own emotions and modeling for the students how I can attach a emotional vocabulary word to how I'm feeling and then sort of articulate how I'm processing that is a really authentic way for them to sort of pick up that same skill set. And for them to also see that I, as their teacher, am a real human who's having real feelings during the day, but I'm also doing my best to handle them in a way that is safe and kind and productive. So they recognize that having big feelings are part of being human, but being able to name them and do something about them is really the work we're going to do together.
Okay, I really like to show that video because I think she does a great example of integrating into her classroom how she's recognizing her own feelings. You know, students aren't paying attention, so she says, I'm frustrated that you're not paying attention to me. And then she models to them a coping skill that she's going to use to deal with that. I'm going to take some deep breaths and I'm going to try again. So it's having those conversations with your students so they learn, okay, in this situation, the teacher's frustrated too. That happens to her, but she does this. So maybe I can try that. Having those conversations with your students. For example, like if you come into school, one of the things, like if I'm late to work or I'm rushing around in the morning, I can be very like anxious and short with people and frustrated because it just creates an uneasiness for me. So acknowledging that with my students and saying, you know, Mrs. Rechtine came in today late. She's a little on edge. I apologize. I'm going to take some deep breaths for myself. I'm going to do some positive self-talk and say it's going to be a better day. I'm going to get back on track. And then we're going to roll with our class. So just having those conversations with your students so they learn and then they model your appropriate coping skill choices that you're making. So piggyback on that, how do we teach emotional regulation? Just like the video said, the number one way to do it is really through modeling. The younger you start, the better, but this isn't something that just an elementary based lesson. This is middle school, high school, K through 12. All of us have emotions, and especially when the older kids can see that adults may be feeling the exact same way they're feeling. You know, you walk into an AP English class and you say to your kids, I'm overwhelmed too. I know this is a lot for us all to do together, but how, and then just model how you're going to get through that feeling of being overwhelmed, or how you're going to chunk it into different portions or things like that. But again, having those conversations. Some foundational ways to help teach and support emotional regulations is to make sure that we are teaching feelings, making sure that students are aware of all specific feelings, and extending that from just sad, mad, happy, glad, but looking at those bigger feelings, because when a student can express and identify the feeling, and if it's a very more intense feeling, that's very powerful, and that can help you in problem solving, and that can help them. You know, there's a difference between being mad at somebody and being jealous. There's a difference between being excited or being anxious and nervous about something. So really looking at teaching those emotions and helping those students identify what the actual emotion is that they're feeling. This can be done obviously through videos, pictures, examples, but you can infuse this into your daily curriculum just through examples throughout your day. You know, and I'm going to probably give this example later, but even when you're doing math problems, and maybe one of the math problems is Angie got more than Johnny in marbles for like a second or third grade story problem. How do you think that Angie and Johnny felt? Angie got more than Johnny. How do you think Johnny felt? Well, he was probably frustrated with that. He might have been jealous. Well, how did Johnny handle that? How should he cope with that feeling? So just infusing those conversations into your already established curriculum, just extending it can help. So we're going to go into now some specific strategies that you can use to help support the education of feeling regulation. Some things that I've just researched and found that are helpful, just to kind of keep you on track or help develop those extension activities. Coming up with a word of a week that's a feeling. I can go back to the feeling of example. Let's say this week in my class, we're going to focus on the feeling of being jealous. On Monday, we're going to learn what it is. On Tuesday, maybe we're going to learn coping skills on how to manage that feeling. And then throughout the week, we're going to look for it in different situations that may happen in the classroom, maybe movies we watch, video clips, different things academically that we're going to be doing in the classroom, but we're really going to focus on that jealousy word. And when we see examples of it come up, we're going to then talk about what coping skills did that person use, negative or positive, or maybe what should they have done in those situations. That's just a nice way to kind of put some parameters or some frameworks in place to start some kind of, feeling education. You can also have a feeling board in your classroom where as situations come up, you put them on the feeling board. So you have your jealousy board for the week. And if there's different situations in curriculum or even in your classroom with students that come up, you can post different things, maybe a coping skill that worked for that jealousy feeling up on the board. Wrap up your week on Fridays talking about it. And like I said earlier, looking for those extension activities throughout your your literature or other academics where you can pinpoint those feelings and extend that discussion. Some other ways that you can incorporate some type of fun feeling activities in your classroom. Journaling is always a great way. You know, again, if you pick jealousy for your word of the week, you have students write a paragraph on a time that they were jealous. They share it out if they feel comfortable. What coping skills that they use, appropriate coping skills could they use if they didn't choose positive ones to handle that feeling of jealousy? And then talk about how it came about. If they use those skills, what was the cause after those skills were used? A feeling blank is kind of fun. You have some kind of little box or jar that students can put their feelings in throughout the week, and then you can choose a time to kind of share them out and discuss them. So again, if you want to go back to your topic of jealousy, maybe your student was jealous during the week. They wrote down when they were jealous and they put it in the jar. You can talk about it at the end of the week and then ask that student, what are some things that we can do to help with jealousy? Because this student was feeling it this week. Or you can open up to all different feelings and then use that as a starting point to have that discussion. Identifying the feeling is important, but also twofold, how to handle that feeling appropriately is just as important. Show video movie clips, incorporate feeling vocabulary words into, if you're doing any kind of spelling word test or different things like that, incorporate some vocabulary words in there. So you can kind of start to infuse that in, doing drawing, Pictionary, sing with the emotion. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. And that's big for the littler kids, but so they can understand that a person's face may look okay, but if they're talking like this, then they're really angry. So giving them clues on it's our voice too that can depict our feeling. It's maybe our body language. So showing them those types of things, doing charades, Pictionary, doing like around the world like you would do to study like multiplication facts, do it with flashcards of feelings. So for the younger kids, show picture faces and have them identify the feeling. For older kids, have them identify a coping skill for that feeling, or have them identify the opposite of that feeling, just to kind of do that acronym synonym type of thing too, or other words that may be the same as that feeling. So you can do different things with that to incorporate it in that are fun. This is very elementary based, but this is just an example of a graphic that can help teach different feeling sets. And what this does is it allows you to show body language. It allows you to show what these feelings look like. So if we look at the first one, silly, how do we know he's silly? Well, he has his tongue out, he has one eyebrow up, the other down. He has a silly look on his face. So that's what silly looks like. So modeling those again at a young age so they know what that looks like. And you can use a variety of different vocabulary feeling words for that. These are a little older. For the older kids, middle school, high school, getting them to act the feelings out, they would love that. They take pictures of themselves and use that to either show other students, or you utilize those in the classroom as various cards. These down here, these are more of a kind of the more broader feelings. So you have like embarrassed, scared, being calm, angry, those types of things, frustrated. And then we're going to talk about this more in a little bit, but making sure that you are teaching appropriate calm down strategies, because it's only so important if a student knows how they're feeling, but more importantly, you want them to utilize a coping skill to help support that feeling. Also, when you're looking at feeling regulation, it can help a lot to have that conversation about the size of your feeling. I used to go into classrooms and we would talk about this, and I would ask the kids, okay, what's a 1 is like a little problem, a 5 is a huge problem. Give me an example. If you lose a video game, what level of problem is that? And many of them would say, oh, that's a 5, that would be awful, kind of thing. So really discussing and giving examples of level of feelings and level of problems, because they should balance each other. Losing a video game is a level 1 problem, and the response to that should be a level 1 like feeling per se. If you lose a video game, you shouldn't be throwing things and yelling and screaming. That's kind of at a 4 or 5 major problem, which you really shouldn't be doing anyway, but that's an extreme response. So talking about that as well. If any of you are counselors, you probably use this 5-point scale quite a lot, or intervention specialists. We use this a lot to kind of help teach behaviors and how to help support them. But these are just some examples that can help that as well. You use your 1 to 5 scale, and you kind of let them know where they should be, where their feelings should be based on what level they are or what level the problem is. And then I like this one on the right because then it gives them a coping skill to use as well. And these can be generated from you. I always encourage at the younger grades that we are generating them for the students so they can practice and learn what works for them. And then for the older students, they should be able to know what works for them, or at least try to identify some things that are going to work for their personality per se. Another important part of this discussion is to talk to students about triggers. And this is probably more so middle school, high school, because they are much more aware of their surroundings and they have more freedom to kind of chart their own course throughout the day per se. So talking with them about triggers, having them think to identify triggers that are for them. So if you have a student that has anxiety issues, and when let's say she walks in the hallway between class changes in the high school, the chaos of the hallway she has a hard time with that. She knows that's a trigger for her. So she should develop some skill sets to help her, whether it's figuring out the hallway situation and going to less crowded hallways, ones that are more calmer, there's less students, or kind of piping into her head positive self-talk as she's out there saying, okay, I know it's loud, but I'm okay. Just take some deep breaths, get through it. I'm going to get to my class. But really helping students figure out what their triggers are, and then preventatively figuring out things to help support them so it doesn't derail them and cause them to escalate in their emotional dysregulation and have a hard time regrouping. Part of helping support emotional regulation is to really think of that calm classroom, because like I said in the beginning of this presentation, calmness does help with feeling regulation. And though there are times where we need to kind of be theatrical and get our kids going because we're seeing them not very motivated, or we're tired or kind of down in our classroom, for the most part, having a calm classroom in terms of its structure and its routines is very helpful for emotional regulation. So focusing on that structure and routine each day, you're not changing things. That will help with consistency and calmness. Also really looking at calm colors. And I think this is hard with education, maybe even more elementary, but we tend to like fun, bold things that get attention and are kind of out there. And I've gone into schools before and there's bulletin boards everywhere with tons of stuff, and the halls have all this artwork and they just have all of these things, which are great. But for a student who is having a hard time regulating their feelings, or they may have like ADHD, that's a lot. And that can create a lot of stimulus, and then it can heighten those emotions. I've seen it in offices before where the school office, they decorate it out for holidays and they have all this different thing because they want the office to be fun, which I get. But then you have the students that are having regulation problems or behavior problems, and they're going to the office, and then it's a crazy fun festival in there, and that's not going to help that emotional regulation. So be mindful of your students, what they may need. If you have students that aren't having any of these issues, then that's nothing to worry about. But if you do, creating that calm, natural classroom where you're using earth tones, you're using kind of that mentality of maybe some different wood benches or pillows, or just some things that are more comforting and cozy will help. Again, like we come to our own homes, we like the cozy comfort when we get home. It brings us just comfort. So establishing that kind of in your classroom as well. Utilizing music, chimes, or bells to help transition. That is a good way to help with comfort levels. Making sure that you're incorporating mindfulness activities into your daily activities. And this I would see is very helpful in middle school, high school level, because the hallways can be crazy and they're kind of running around talking to their friends. And then they come into a classroom and you're like, okay, sit down and be quiet. We're going to learn today. So establishing some type of mindfulness activities when they first enter the classroom can be very helpful for them. So they just kind of decompress, get ready to go. Teaching these, practicing these, and then really having conversations also about self-care for them. I've been surprised. When I worked in the school systems, I'd go into classrooms and teach lessons on self-care and adequate sleep. And we know students aren't getting enough sleep, but I don't even know if they're aware of it. I would go into talk to fifth graders about how much sleep they should be getting. Some are getting like 6 hours a night when they should be 9 to 10 hours. So just having those conversations with kids can be helpful as well. Also, making sure that on the flip side of teaching the feelings, we're also supporting them and teaching them the coping skills. So here's just a list of, these are kind of the top 5 that I think of. There are so many different ones. And I actually always look to my students in order to generate these lists, especially the older kids. They know what works for them. So there's been times I've been in classrooms and we brainstormed 50 different ways to help cope with feelings. And then I would just challenge them to kind of pick their top 3 of what they were going to use. We would typically go through the 50 and see which ones were appropriate for school and then pick from those lists. Also, in order to support emotional regulation, it is nice to have some type of check-in system or some type of way for your students to let you know where they're at, especially when they're coming into your classroom, maybe from switching classes. This is kind of a nice gatekeeper approach as well to keep kind of chaos or any type of aggressive or negative behaviors out of your class. If you can kind of greet them at the door and have some way to assess. And we're going to talk about some more of these in just a second, but some type of check-in system where they can let you know where they're at emotionally. If there is a point where they might be more heightened and they are excited or kind of out of sorts, then you can gear them to tools that they can use to lower that and get their body more stable. Maybe they come into your class super like tired, hungry, unmotivated, kind of just like a blob. Then you can direct them to some tools that might heighten them, get them in a learning mode. You know, go get a drink, go take some deep breaths, go do whatever skill sets that you've developed for them to cope with these feelings. But being that that person, that gatekeeper that can kind of gear them towards that can also be helpful. And when they do utilize these strategies, positively praise and recognize and make a big deal out of it. I know that, but as much as you can recognize that positively, then they're more apt to do it. Students that get frustrated and just give up or push their papers on the floor, we react to that. It's a negative behavior, but they are getting our attention. So if we can turn that and give our attention and react when they're doing what they should be doing, or they're regulating their feeling in an appropriate way, that will help curb those other outbursts. If you see that Johnny typically gets frustrated and you see that he's frustrated, but using some tools, acknowledge that, recognize that. Say, Johnny, I am so proud of you right now. You're using some coping skills. I know you were frustrated. Excellent job. Thank you. And making some type of public discussion around that with your class or board, a shout out board of students that are using their skill sets can also be very helpful. It's a process for all of us. I can't say that I 100% emotions appropriately all the time. We're all works in progress with it. So acknowledging that and kind of celebrating those successes can also help go a long way with it. We are going to watch a video here about some other emotional regulation strategies. This one gives examples K through 12 is why I like to show it. But it starts kind of with what you can do, and then how you can branch off and extend that for the older grades in junior high, high school. So I'm going to show this one.
Students often experience big, complex emotions as they explore the world around them. But understanding where emotions come from, how they can derail our thinking brains, and ultimately how they can be managed, takes time and lots of practice. By teaching the skills of emotional literacy, educators can give students a set of tools they can use throughout their lives to calm themselves, navigate interpersonal conflicts, and keep themselves focused and on task when they need to. Feeling frustrated is different from feeling angry, anxious, or overwhelmed. A limited emotional vocabulary means that students miss out on nuances that express feelings in all of their complexity. For younger students, experiment with feelings charts or picture books that incorporate a broad range of emotions accompanied by illustrations of facial expressions. For older kids, try brainstorming emotions. Can they find 20 different words for happy or sad? Post the words in the classroom and ask students to incorporate them into their own writing and conversations, or use them to express how they're feeling in the moment. Emotions and cognition work in tandem, affecting focused attention and working memory. Consider teaching students about the limbic system, the brain structures responsible for emotional and behavioral responses, and the role of executive functions. Learning the neuroscience of emotion helps normalize emotional responses while empowering students with the science of why we have big feelings, how they can happen in the brain, and what can be done to assert control and regain focus. As students mature, new emotional challenges arise. They continue to need plenty of opportunities to practice expressing their feelings. Try a quick rose and thorn check-in where kids share one positive and one negative thing happening for them. They can choose what and how much they'd like to share day to day. Or you can ask older students to do a daily dedication where they talk about someone who has inspired them, living or dead, fictional or real, in 30 to 60 seconds. That sends the message that being vulnerable by sharing emotions is encouraged, which in turn fosters a sense of community and belonging. Once students feel comfortable identifying and expressing their emotions, consider introducing some strategies to positively shift their feelings in a social context. Try a mindfulness exercise where students can take deep breaths and tune into how they're feeling as they get ready to learn. Or help students reflect by letting them take turns sharing an appreciation, an apology, or an aha moment with the class. As students apply emotional literacy to real-life situations, they learn to deeply connect with their emotions and respond to others with intentionality and compassion.
Okay, great. One thing I like about that video is it goes into really talking to our kids kind of about their brain and how it works. And if they're not stable in their emotions, how that is going to cognitively affect them as well. So I think that was a good strategy there. Some curriculums to support emotion regulation. I'm going to be honest, there's not a lot. I've done research and I've kind of been shocked at that. Much more, I think it's just a hands-on approach and infusing it day to day. I don't know if any of you are familiar with zones of regulation. This is a great program to use, a great curriculum. It's very simplistic to use. It can be used K through 12. It teaches students to identify a zone. Every feeling goes into a zone. And then it teaches the students to come up with tools to support each of those zones. I have used it personally with a lot of students, and they get it right away. It's very kind of black and white in terms of that. You have 4 zones. Red is when you're feeling mad, frustrated, angry. Blue is when you're down, sad, hungry, unmotivated. Yellow is when you're heightened, you're excited, nervous, worried, you're kind of bouncy. And then the green zone is when you are your best self, is when you're focused, ready to learn. And it just teaches students that they need to be in the green zone when they're at school and in the classroom. So if they come into your classroom when they're in the yellow zone, all hyped up from the hallway, they need to take care of themselves, use tools to get back in that green zone. So it's very black and white, and I like that. These are just some examples of different check-ins with the zones and how they can just help themselves get back into the specific zones, just as some reminders.
Angie, I want to interject and say,
sure.
We have 7 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
This is something that I've used to help kind of with those triggers. So at the bottom, and this is elementary based because I use this with some 3rd graders, I believe, but to go through their day and see where they stand throughout their day with the zones. And then this helps with their triggers. This helps them to figure out, okay, look at this in the mornings and night, I'm tired, which is pretty normal. For the most part, I'm in the green zone during the day. So it does nicely kind of depict. If you have a student that's in the yellow and red zone a lot of their day, then it encourages them to put some tools in place to help manage that. It's just a nice visual. Second step also has a great SEL curriculum. They have it developed for elementary, middle school. They are in the process of developing it for high school right now. They do also have a principal toolkit and after school programming. This does also a great job of teaching emotional regulation and supporting that. Lessons are broken down by topic. The grade levels build on each other. And I will say this example probably looks a little elementary based to you. The middle school one is very age appropriate, and they do a great job of utilizing videos and different things to really get the kids engaged. I haven't seen the high school one yet, obviously, because that's still in development, but they do a great job of kind of building upon each self. And this emotional regulation is much more K through 2. It's very young, but it would be a good first start for you kindergartner teachers. Personally, I would go with zones, but this is another great tool that you can use. And virtually, I know COVID world, we were all trying to make adjustments virtually. I know some of you are still teaching maybe in digital academies, so I wanted to throw this in here, but Bitmojis are a great way to show emotions, and older kids are into Bitmojis. They may even have them themselves, or I don't know, or different Snapchat filters or different things like that. But you can utilize these in order to incorporate the discussions of feelings and lessons within online platforms, having some kind of check-ins with Google Forms or a Google Meets poll, using slides to develop sensory rooms for them or tools that they can use at home to self-manage themselves. Students that are learning from home, their environment, you can't control that. So they probably need some extra supports. Maybe if it's loud there, if they're not motivated, it's hard to work from home at times because there's a lot of other distractions of things we need to do. So creating toolboxes for them can be helpful for them to use at home as well. These are just some examples of Bitmojis. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but I use these a lot in feeling regulation lessons because I think they do a great job depicting the feelings. I mean, you can see here my first one, I'm bored, don't have any motivation, kind of given up, dragging around. Then you see me as surprised about something. The next one, I'm angry, mad. And then on this last one, I'm good, controlling my body, ready to go, I'm ready to have a good day. So they're a great way to kind of depict those. You can use them in your classrooms, different even assignments, kind of throw those on or encourage students to pick them. So just to kind of wrap all of this up, how we react emotionally is a choice in any situation. And that's what we talked about at the beginning. We all have feelings. That's a response to a situation, something that's happened to us. But how we choose to respond to that feeling, we can control. And helping our students know this, identify this, and helping giving the skill sets on how to appropriately managing their feelings will help them be so much more successful and help your classroom be so much more cohesive and just productive, that they're managing their behaviors instead of disrupting the learning of others at times. So we have a couple minutes left, maybe 3 minutes left. Questions, comments, anything people would like to share or know more about? I also have my email address on here. If you ever think of any questions or like any information on what I shared, please send me an email. I've had people email me, hey, I'm going to try this in my classroom. Can I call you or email you with questions as I go? Please feel free. If you want to extend on anything I talked about, any of the programming or strategies, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Angie. It's wonderful. We do have this session recorded. I'm going to stop recording right now.